Okay, good evening, everybody. This is Matt Martin here, and it looks like people are still joining. So I'm going to give it another minute or two to get a few more folks into the room, and then we'll get started. Hopefully you're dialed in for the pilot onboarding webinar. And hopefully many of you are aspiring CAP pilots. So we'll talk about the process of becoming a CAP pilot, training that everyone has to do, and then hopefully we'll get time to kind of walk through WMIRS to show you how to schedule an airplane, create the sortie for your first training flight, and all of those things that you need to do to get a release to go fly your first training mission. We're recording this, and once we're done, we'll post it to the Wing Stand Eval website, and that way anybody who couldn't make it could refer to this, or if you just want to refer back to it as you go for reference, we can it'll be there for you. Let's see here. We got 52. Yes. So here's a hey Shane. So Jack just posted the A24 mission. Yeah, if you look at any of the missions right now, any of the A missions in WMIRS, you'll find that none of them are funded right now, and that's because it's October 6th, the beginning of the new fiscal year for the U.S. government, which means that a lot of our mission, we don't have our funding stream set up yet. Okay, Shane, let me make you a co-host. Attendees. And right now, many of you may be following the ups and downs of Congress, but let's see here. Promote to panelist. Okay. Until there's a budget, and then the Air Force and First Air Force, and then CAP headquarters has had an opportunity to turn on those funding lines. You're not going to see any funding in any of the A missions. I don't have an explanation for the $1,000 two days ago. WMIRS has a lot of ins and outs, and so it's tough to say why it was showing $1,000 2 days ago and is now showing $30 now. But I can tell you that none of the fiscal year 22 funding streams have been turned on yet, and it may take a week or two. So stand by for that. Okay, so why don't we go ahead and get started? We got 56 people on the attendee list, so thank you very much for dialing in tonight. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Matt Martin. I'm the Chief of Training for the Texas Wing. I'm also a member of the Grand Prairie Squadron, and I live here in Arlington, Texas. I've been a member of the CAP for about 17 years. I also did a career in the Air Force where I flew RC-135s and MQ-9s. And you know, I commercial CFI, CFII pilot. I've been flying with the CAP for a long time. So today we're going to talk about the onboarding process, the requirements, the procedure, the checklists, how to do it, and then a little bit about WMIRS. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start out. Let's see here. First thing I'm going to do is share my screen. Who can share? Okay, yes. And I'm just going to share my desktop because I've got a lot of different documents, websites, and other things I'm going to show you guys tonight. Okay, so hopefully you can all see that now. First document I'm going to go to is let's see here. Yeah, is this one here. Let me scroll up to the top. And it turns out the CAP has anticipated many questions regarding pilot onboarding with a pamphlet entitled Pilot Onboarding. And it's as it says, a resource for new CAP pilots and people who are mentoring new CAP pilots to go through the process, right? So we'll refer back to this throughout the talk tonight, because it's a pretty good resource. But first, I'm going to tell you where to find this. If this document is something you haven't seen before, and you're not quite sure where we find these documents, you find them on the, let's see here, on this website here, right? So if you go to, let's start out at the very beginning. You go to gocivilairpatrol.com. You should end up with a website that looks like this. And then you see there's a section over here called members. And if you hold your cursor over it, you'll see that there's a publication library. So click on that. And then there's all kinds of great publications here on the left, starting out with the one that we care about, which is a pamphlet. And it's down here in the 70- series. And the 70- series, generally speaking, is operations in the CAP. So all of our regulations start out with a 70, and our standards and everything about our evaluation process, all the 70 series of regulations. And so there's one here titled 70-12. It has a P in front of it for pamphlet, and that is your pilot onboarding pamphlet. If you start going through it, let's see here. It goes through a lot of things, and I'm not going to go through this in order. You guys can read this at your leisure. I'm going to jump around. A great place to start is the pilot requirement checklist. So if you go here to section 4 of this pamphlet on page 44, it tells you what you need to do to become a CAP pilot, right? Assuming, of course, you already have some sort of pilot qualification. The most basic level of CAP pilot is the VFR pilot. And that's basically the ability to be a pilot in command of an aircraft in VFR conditions, VMC. And to do that, you have to be an active CAP member, 17 years of age, have some sort of FAA certificate, have some sort of medical. We'll talk about that. Have a current flight review. Now, it is possible to get your flight review through the CAP. But if you're starting out as a new pilot, that's just one more thing you'd have to do. So it's great if you're able to, yes, that's true. Basic Med is one of the medical certificates that you can hold. I think, I don't know if that's considered higher than class 3 or not, but Basic Med or class 3 is the minimum. Class 2, class 1, of course, are definitely acceptable. And then, yeah, so recommended that you come to the CAP with a current VFR. If not, we can work around that. We can get you a VFR. But then you have to join the CAP, right? Makes sense. To do that, you have to get through level 1. To start flying CAP aircraft, you have to be a level 1 senior member. And so there's all kinds of things that you need to do that. We won't go into too much detail about that, other than what's here in the pamphlet. One important one here is this aircraft ground handling course. So before we go too much farther, let me show you where to find, if you haven't seen that yet, where to find all these courses that you need to take, right? So that's good. So there is a I'm sure you've seen this. In addition to the gocivilairpatrol.com, there is a capnhq.gov website. But if you go to gocivilairpatrol.com, you can get to the NHQ website, to e-services. And of course, if you go there and you're not already logged in, it'll ask you to log in. Once you get there, there's a number of courses that you're going to need to find. So if you go down here to online learning on the left-hand side, you'll find this thing called the learning management system. There's also a thing called online courses and exams. There's not much there anymore. Used to be a lot of stuff there, but we've since transitioned over to this system called Access. So go to the learning management system. We have a number of courses here on sort of the top level of the LMS, but what you really want here is the Access portal, and it's a different website. And once you get there, you're going to find all kinds of courses that you're ultimately going to care about, including this 70-1 general flight exam, this aircrew professionalism. If you're going to do a G1000 transition, there's some courses on that. But if you go up here to course catalog, they give you a complete list. And the first one you're probably going to want to take is this aircraft ground handling training, right? So you do that, enroll here. Everything's automatically synchronized with these services. So once you take the course and pass, it'll update your record and it'll show you as having done that particular course. So let's go back now to our checklist here. So you've done your aircraft ground handling course. And now you start here with the onboarding flight training, right? And so kind of contrary to the way it was in the past, the CAP now has funding and a more formal way to get your onboarding done, right? At pretty much no cost to you. So I'm going to switch now to this other regulation, or other standard rather, which is called the 70-1. I need to shorten this window here so I can actually see what is going on. You find the 70-1 in the same place that you found this pamphlet, only it's a standard. So you go into the standard section and titled Cap Standard 71-1, Aircrew Training, Airplane, right? So basically all the ways we're going to do training to get people qualified in flying airplanes is now in this standards publication. And so we'll start out at the beginning here, onboarding of new pilots, and it kind of goes through some information similar to what's in that pamphlet, which it kind of lays out the ground training. There's another pamphlet here to the 71-2, which is that onboarding pamphlet, and then the flight training, which also references that pamphlet, and then starts talking about the specific flight training content that you're going to do in your onboarding sorties, right? So we'll refer back to this here in a second, but there's a process, there's actual syllabus, and this is it that you have to cover to become your initial CAP pilot qualification. Let's go back to our pamphlet here and keep going through our checklist. Of course, there is when you go into, let's go to it right now, a complete statement of understanding and ops qualification. So we go back to our website here, e-services. Again, go back to the same place you went to find those online courses, but now you're going to go to operations and you're going to go to operations qualifications, right? This is where we track all of the qualifications, documents, everything we need to demonstrate that you are qualified to fly airplanes. And then when you create sorties and release sorties through WMIRS, it's actually checking against the information in ops quals to determine if you're actually qualified to fly the sortie that you're trying to go fly, right? So there's a number of things in here that you're going to care about. And if the first time you log in here, it's going to give you some questions you got to answer, and then give you the opportunity to go into this menu here on the left-hand side. So kind of starting over here in the pilot section. Actually, before we go into here, I find one of the most useful tools in ops quals is this button here called What Do I Need? So if you click on that, first thing you're going to have to do is enter your CAP ID. And then it's going to give you a drop-down menu of all the different qualifications to fly airplanes in the CAP, right? So let's say I wanted to find out if I'm qualified as a VFR pilot. I can click on VFR pilot, and it's going to give me a list of all the things that I need and whether I have it complete with a green check mark or not complete with a little flag, right? And you can see I've done a good job of keeping all my stuff up to date. So I've certified that I'm a commercial single engine land pilot, that I have class 2 medical, that I have a flight review, I've done my airplane questionnaire, et cetera, right? And if there was something that I was missing that would prevent me from getting approved to go fly a CAP airplane on a CAP mission, it would be flagged here, right? And I could figure out exactly, what I need to add or to validate to get that greened up. And so now I can get my flight release in WMIRS. But what you're going to care about when you're first starting out, first thing we're going to want to do here is your FAA requirements. And here's where you have here's the place to actually enter your qualifications, right? And so this will all be blank when you first log in, and you select, all your different certifications here. You check mark them. You put in your, if you have a CFI, you put in the date for that, what type of CFI you are. If you have medical, you put in what type of medical you have and the date for that. If it's basic med, there's a special section for it. For your flight review, you put in the date of your flight review. You got it through Wings program, there's a section for that, et cetera, right? And then if you've got additional qualifications, high performance, complex, et cetera, you put all that in, you hit submit, and now it will go into the system for somebody on the Wing staff to validate. And I'm one of those people, but we have we have all of the Stand-Eval representatives across the state checking this on a regular basis. They'll look at this that you submitted, and then they will look at the documents that you have uploaded to validate or to back up those qualifications, right? So once you've selected all those things and hit submit, then you go up here and click view upload documents, and there's a special pilot tab. You can select which document you want to upload. You browse to find the actual file. You go in here and it takes JPEGs and PDFs and PNGs, et cetera. Select the airplane, the type of airplane that it applies to. Most of our stuff is either going to be 172 or 182. We've got a few 206s, and then we've got a GA8. We also have, Shane, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, we have a 182RG, which in this thing is listed as a C82R. So if you're out in El Paso and you're getting your initial Form 5 in the 182RG, it's a C82R. Upload all your documents, and then that way when myself or any of the Wing Stand-Eval reps go in to validate the qualifications that you input, I can go into your documents here and I can take a look at your logbook entry for your BFR. I can look at your copy of your medical certificate. I can look at your wings phase certificate if that's what you're using, et cetera, and see that, oh yeah, this person is qualified for that, and therefore I can validate that qualification, and it'll green you up in the system, and you're off to the races, right? And then likewise, so that's your FAA requirements. Once you're ready to do your check ride, and your check ride is complete, you'll have the 70-5 form, as well as an aircraft questionnaire. And just like your FAA requirements, here's where you will enter that stuff. If you take the 70-1 online exam online from Access, it'll automatically update here. Your questionnaire, the aircraft type, which we'll get into here in a second. Whether it's annual, abbreviated, if you're onboarding, it's all going to be your annual, and then additional endorsements that you get on that check ride. Upload that or hit submit. Upload a copy of the actual. You have to scan in the copy of your signed 70-5 form, and then that will be there for validation as well. Right. So it's kind of the beginning the entry point in e-services and WMIRS. To get all that process started. Let's go back to our onboarding checklist here. And that's pretty much it, right? You do all those things, and now you're ready for flight training, and schedule and fly as outlined in section 1. All right, let's go to section 1 of this pamphlet, see what it has to say. The first thing it's going to tell you is, so I'm not going to go into details about the content in here. You're going to have to take this aircraft professionalism course here on Access. Pretty straightforward. So part 1, now you're ready to go fly your mission, right? Your first training mission, and you're going to do it. You're going to do it per this 71-1 onboarding sortie. And return to flight's a little bit different. And you can see there's just a 1 page to the syllabus. You need to cover all these things. If your current, sort of qualified proficient pilot in small airplanes, maybe you're flying 172s, 182s already, then this is just kind of getting training in how to do this the CAP way. If not, then we could potentially do this content over a couple of sorties. But I'm going to talk about the specific Texas wing onboarding here in a second. So stand by for that. Okay, so the first thing it wants you to do is go to eServices to do these initial tasks. And I'm not going to tell you how to log into eServices. That's because you're going to do a lot of stuff in eServices. So that's help you can get through your squadron. But what I am going to start talking about is WMIRS. So WMIRS is how you will, well, actually, we'll talk about WMIRS at the end. Ops quals, which we kind of just reviewed. FA certificates, instructor ratings, additional training, flight review. Okay, so let's talk about the actual training that you're going to get. And I'm going to start with this thing here. So if you are a new CAP pilot, or let's say you're a new CAP member and you want to become a pilot because you're an FAA certified pilot, we have a document here called Texas Wing DO Requalification Pilot Onboarding Request Process. And this one is for calendar year 20. There'll be a new one in calendar year 21. There will be a new one in calendar year 22, but the content's not going to change too much. And this is how you get funding for your training, right? So CAP National Headquarters is providing funding for onboarding as well as return to flight for pilots who have been not current for a long time and want to get recurrent, or maybe they haven't been non-current for that long, but something prevented them from maintaining that currency in the CAP, and they need to get recurrent. And so this outlines how we do it in the Texas Wing to get you the funding approval that you need to get your training paid for by the CAP. And so there's a very basic approval process, and it's this, right? You have to have current membership and pilot records, and all the online training has to be complete. We just kind of talked about that a little bit. The 781-1 is, just to address Jack's question there, new funding requests are not required for fiscal year 22. What I'm saying is there will be a new letter for calendar year 22 that will provide guidance for the upcoming calendar year. It's going to be very similar to the current calendar year. If you have previous funding approved, you don't have to repeat the process. It's just we're going to refresh the this letter to make sure we have the latest guidance included for all new applicants. If you have a previous applications already been approved, you don't have to reaccomplish. Okay, so the process goes up from your squadron commander to the group commander, and that's it. And then I get a copy of it, and then if both those individuals have signed off on it or their designated representatives, then you'll be approved to go off and get your flight training. When you do that flight training, there's a couple things we want in the sortie: the fuel receipt, the copy of the syllabus item performed, so the 71-1 page that outlines the training that you're doing on a particular sortie, and that's it. So there's two forms here: the training request for the return to flight, which is the A24. But the one that you guys mostly care about is the A0, which is the initial onboarding request. And it's pretty self-explanatory. All of your information, including your flight hours, et cetera. If you have a lot of airplanes are G1000, and there's a specific, in fact, I'll show it to you here. There's a specific syllabus for G1000 transition training in the 71-1. So if you go here to 71-1, go down here to the G1000 training, we see we have all the different types here. Makes and models, high performance, technically advanced aircraft, which is G1000, or G1000 specific, as well as complex turbocharge. So if you go here to the G1000 training, if you don't have if you don't have extensive experience in a G1000, if you're just sort of new to the G1000, then this is what's outlined in it. There's basically 2 sorties for VFR and 2 sorties for IFR. And so here's VFR part 1. There's some ground instruction on all of this. And then there's flight instruction, which covers all these items. And then a second sortie that covers these items, both ground instruction and flight instruction. And that will prepare you to do the VFR evaluation in a G1000 aircraft. Now, if you have an instrument qualification and you want to have instrument privileges in the CAP G1000 airplane, then you got to continue to the IFR portion, which is this part here. Here's the ground training. Here's the flight training, 2 sorties again, ground training and flight training. And then once you do that, once you've done all 4 of those G1000 sorties, then you are prepared to do the, of course, assuming your instructor is in agreement, then you're prepared to take your eval in a G1000 airplane and do the instrument demo so that you can get a G1000 IFR, VFR endorsement on your eval, right? And be ready to go do G1000 missions in CAP airplanes, right? So that's just an example of the things that, let's see here, of the one of the items that could be included in your onboarding. But if you have significant previous G1000 experience, then we could potentially waive up to all 4 of those sorties in the 71-1, right? The pamphlet just says if you have significant previous G1000 experience, then you don't necessarily have to do those 4 sorties. And if that's the case, and when you're doing your onboarding training events, if the instructor feels like you're competent, proficient with the G1000, then we'll send you on to your check ride and not require you to go through all 4 of those, right? But if not, then that all 4 of those sorties will be covered under your training request, right? Likewise with high performance and if needed, the complex or turbo endorsements, right? If you're out in El Paso and the only airplane you have available is that 182 RG and you need a complex endorsement, that can be covered under the A0 onboarding. If the only airplane in your area is a turbo 182 or a turbo G1000 or a turbo 206, then that could also be covered as part of your initial onboarding, the transition. If that's the case, then same deal. You go back to your trusty handy dandy 71-1 and go to the specific, let's say you need to do the high performance transition. Here's the syllabus for that, right? Typically, and it says typically 4 hours of dual. If you need to do complex airplanes, then you go in here and you go to the complex syllabus, right? Complex is a little bit more involved, especially if you don't have a previous complex experience, because it's going to, oh, this is where I have to go to the other syllabus, right? So for complex and turbocharge, those syllabi are actually not contained in the 71-1. You have to go to an other location for those syllabi. I know we have a turbocharged syllabus. Shane, do we now have a complex syllabus on the Wing CAP website? There's another website I'm going to go show you guys, and that is.
I believe we do.
Okay.
Let me go look for it. We have one. Let me just make sure it's actually on the site.
Okay. I'm going to do that right now. You can see I just Googled Texas Wing CAP, which is how I still find this site. I probably should bookmark it. Once you find that, you go to functional areas, H to Z, and then go down here to operations, and then go down here to stand eval. You click on that, and it's actually going to say, hey, we have a new website. You click on that, and it takes us just to the new stand eval website. And here we have pilot training syllabi, right? You go pilot training syllabi, and off to the right, yeah, here it is. We have both a complex and a turbo syllabus, along with with questionnaire and some training materials let's take a look at this. Oh boy, you guys are gonna meet my cat, the Midnight Shadow, who typically insists on being part of Zoom calls. So here is the training plan for the RG, and so you need to review all of this and go through a couple of training events covering all of these items, right? And so that will also be covered by your onboarding training if needed, right? If you go into your A-0 form and you need high performance, you mark that. I guess there's not a section. This is something we'll change here for the upcoming year. We're gonna put a field right here. Okay. That says if you have need complex, right? And of course, you're only going to need complex if you live in El Paso, and the 182 RG is kind of your only airplane that you're going to have a chance to get qualified in. So you fill this thing out here, and then you send it up the chain. Now it typically says, if you're sort of a current qualified person, you're just going to do the onboarding syllabus. So it's just one ride. You're a proficient pilot. You think you only need one ride to get up to speed and ready for your check ride, then we'll approve you for 1.5 hours. If you need this high performance syllabus, if you need the G1000, then those will be approved here. Now, let's say you're kind of a rusty pilot, right? You may already have a high performance endorsement. Maybe even you already have some G1000 experience, but you haven't flown in a long time. If you need additional hours, 2 or 3 flights to kind of get ready for your eval, that's totally fine. We will totally cover it. And that's kind of why we asked about flight hours in the last year and flight hours in 90 days. And so as this form makes its way up the chain, we'll identify additional hours that you need and approve you for those additional hours, 4 or 5 or 6 hours, or whatever the case is. And you know what, if you're kind of a rusty pilot and you get through those 3 or 4 flights and you still feel like you need another flight or 2 to get ready for an eval, your instructor and your squadron commander can up channel that request, and we will almost certainly approve it if your instructor thinks that 1 or 2 more flights would be sufficient to get you ready for an eval, right? We want everybody to get there. We want everybody to be successful, and so we will get you the training that you need to do that, right? And so you get this form approved, send me a copy, and have a copy on hand, and you'll be off to the races. So now let's go back to our pamphlet, which is this guy, right? Once you are sort of ready to go for CAP VFR pilot, there's a couple things you need for this qualification here, the transport mission pilot. And of course, that really is the qualification that you need to be useful to the CAP, right? Even if you don't have the time that you need to become a mission pilot and go out and do search and rescue missions, there's still plenty of things that a transport mission pilot can do, including last year we did lots and lots of these COVID missions where we flew test kits around, and those are all transport mission pilot type events where you hop in an airplane loaded up with coolers full of COVID tests and take them somewhere. That's basically just a basic cross country, but that's a TMP type of mission. So to do that, there's a few more things that you got to do. You've got to do this General Emergency Services quiz, which, boy, Shane, is that an access course?
Yes, GES is.
Yeah. But then there's the other 2 courses, which are not access courses, which are actually hosted by the National Incident Management System, which is kind of a part of FEMA. We do give you the link to that. So if you click on this separate website, you go to the FEMA website, to the distance learning, and you see there's some options here. Go to the IS course list, and the 2 courses that you care about, I'm going to click view all. is 100, Introduction to the Incident Management System. If you click on that, it kind of gives you an overview of the course. You click on Interactive Web Course, and it allows you to take the course right away online and complete that requirement. When you're done, this does not automatically sync up to OpsQuals. So you need to get the certificate that you get at the end of that course, because you're going to upload that into OpsQuals. Same with the other course that you need, which is the IS 700. It's this one that's labeled IS 700B, Introduction to, and take the most recent, or yeah, this is the most recent one, IS 700B, Introduction to the Incident Management System. And we want you to know this stuff because even a transport mission pilot may be part of a search and rescue event where we stand up a incident command post and get a bunch of missions from the Air Force to go do some, disaster relief or search and rescue related thing. And we may have a need for transport mission pilots to just go get stuff or take people somewhere. And like we may ask you, hey, take the governor down to Austin, right? Or something like that, right? In which case you'll have to be sort of part of the incident command system to even fly that TMP sortie, right? But it's the same deal here. Take the interactive web course. There are materials here. It's open. Of course, these tests are all open book. And then when you take the final exam, you get a certificate. And once you have done that, you go. Let's see here. I have to get rid of that. Let me get rid of that. Okay. You go back to e-services and back to OpsQuals. So you go into OpsQuals, and then there's a section over here called multi-squitter entry. And the squitter is the squadron training. I think that's what squitter is, right? The squadron training. And if you go here, and you can go under, let's see here. I haven't done this in a while. I think this is incident. Oh boy, help me out, Shane. Where do you go to enter your IS 100 and IS 700? Oh, here it is.
So,
yeah. So IS 100, right? And this is going to give you just a little form to fill out with the date and the certificate ID. You hit submit, and then you do it again for the IS 700, and you hit submit, and you upload that certificate that you get. And now it's same like all your other things with FAA and oh, here it is, specialty qualification training record. I'll buy that. And you upload that, and then we can go in here and we can see your certificate. We can see that you've submitted the task, and now you can get validated, and that will hit. For example, if you go in here to the what do I need section, again, you got to put in your cap ID, hit return, and then I go in here down to transport mission pilot. And then we can green up these two things here along with your GES, along with your aircraft ground handling. You should have already validated you're 18 years or older. And then this is part of those FAA requirements, right? You enter in 50 hours cross country, 100 hours PIC, logbook entry, and we can validate all this stuff. And then you're ready to take your TMP check ride, right? And then once you have your TMP check ride and you have all the stuff green, then you can go and schedule airplanes and get released to fly solo sorties with all of those things checked off. All right, let's go back to our checklist, right? And then it's kind of the last step is your squadron commander doing the TMP qualification. So that's kind of the quick and dirty of the onboarding process and all of the required elements. The upload is on a different page. Yeah, the upload is, if you click up here and go to documents, unlike the pilot entries that I showed you previously, you go here to emergency services. And if you click on this, oh, I'm going to cancel that. If you click on here, it's going to ask you all the things that you want to upload. And here's your IS 100 and IS-700 that you would upload to validate that under the Emergency Services tab. Okay, does anybody have any questions on any of that stuff that I covered? Because I'm going to go now into some of the specifics about WMIRS and about the 71-1, and then about what you're actually going to be evaluated on, what you need to train to and what you need to be evaluated on to get your qualification, right? So let's talk about WMIRS. Let's go back to when you log in the e-services, you're going to get a page that looks something like this, right? And you actually can customize this page a little bit. One of the things I want to point out while I'm here is if you go up here to your My e-services, the little gears, and this is where you would go in here and do your contact information. Let me get these windows out of the way. One of the things that is going to be very important to you is that you have a piece of information here for ForeFlight. You can enter this at any time, but it's not going to activate until you are a qualified CAP pilot. But once you are a qualified CAP pilot and you have some piece of information here, an email address that you want to use for your ForeFlight account, then the national headquarters will activate your ForeFlight account. So to add that information, you go here to add new contact, you select ForeFlight, you make it your primary, and then you put in the email address that you want to use for your ForeFlight, for your free CAP provided ForeFlight military flight bag performance subscription, which is the most Gucci version of the subscription that you can possibly get. And at a later date, in fact, we already have some webinars uploaded about all the great things that you can do at ForeFlight with your CAP subscription. You're going to want that, all right? Trust me. And that's how you get it once you are a qualified CAP pilot. Okay, that's a slight diversion. But let's say you're back at your e-services login here. There's another way to get to WMIRS. The way I usually do is just go to the bottom of the page here and see this WMIRS link. Click on that, and that brings you to WMIRS. And you can see it's been a few days since I have logged in because it's telling me that there's a critical item that I have to sign off on. And if it's the first time you log into WMIRS, there's going to be a lot of these. So consider this your read file, right? If you have any military experience, you know that when we had a squadron, before you could go flying on a training sortie or whatever, there's typically a number of read file items that you had to read and sign off on before you could go do that. And that was tracked by our flight management folks. And this is kind of the same thing, right? So this is trying to say, okay, new link has been mission page. Okay, I think I actually heard about this. Will display current maintenance snapshot mission. Okay, I'm actually going to show you the maintenance snapshot. So I'm going to mark that as red. And then typically, if you've read all your critical read file items, this is the page that you get when you first log into WMIRS, right? So before we go into all of these, I'm going to show you how to actually schedule an airplane that you want. So you actually go over here on the left side and go down here to the support function. And then you go down to this thing called the scheduling module. And you click on it, and it gives you a calendar. Now, my profile, I already have lots of airplanes in my profile, right? And so it automatically goes to my aircraft, but you may not have any airplanes loaded to your profile. In fact, if it's the first time going to WMIRS, you won't, right? To do that, you go to update my preferences, and you won't have any airplanes here. And so you would click on this button, which would bring up this menu, and then you would scroll all the way down to the Texas wing, and it would bring up a list of all the airplanes in the Texas wing. And at this point, hopefully you're talking to an instructor already, you're talking to your squadron leadership, you kind of already know what airplane you're going to be doing the training in. And so you'll want to add that airplane and maybe the nearby airplanes, if there's a chance you might use them for training, to your profile by clicking on them and saving the changes. And then they'll be all added to your profile. I happen to have all the airplanes in the DFW area as part of my profile, because that's what I want to look at when I'm thinking about scheduling a flight. All right, so let's go back to the calendar. And let's say I want to go flying this weekend. Actually, here we are in October, and this weekend is the 9th. And I can already see what airplanes are booked for that day, right? So I already know that if I wanted to fly 611 or 116 Charlie Papa, which is a 182 G1000 at Fort Worth, it's already booked from 10 to 1. You can actually set the up here in the preference, the time, the way you want the time to read. I set mine in local Central Daylight Time, but you can set it to Zulu time if you want to do the conversion, or a different time zone if you're in a different time zone, right? But for me, it's easier just to look at local time because that's what I'm typically doing, right? So it's telling me, hey, this airplane's already booked, right? And so now if I want to book a different airplane, or I want to book this airplane at a different time, I'm going to click on the date, okay? And then I have the opportunity here to select any of the airplanes that are already saved in my profile. Let's say I want to fly 455. I would select it, and then there's a mission that I probably need to select to assign that scheduled airplane to. And if it's a new onboarding sortie, then I'm going to use this mission here, Texas, fiscal year 22, 3597, onboarding and return to flight, which you can see is active from 30 September to 26 September of next year, right? I select that, the times that I want to start. And again, I'm looking at everything in Central Daylight Time. So make sure you're not, because it defaults to Zulu. So make sure you actually have the right time zone. You know, the time I want to start, let's say I want to start at 0900. And typically I schedule the airplane for the time I'm actually going to need the airplane. And that includes the brief, the pre-flight, the sortie, and the putting the airplane away period of time, right? And so if you're going to fly a 1.5 hour sortie, you're really going to need the airplane for about 3 hours, right? So I put in 3 hours here. You have the option to add a sortie, which I like to do. I'm not actually going to schedule this one, but if I selected yes, then whenever I hit schedule, it would also create the corresponding sortie for it under this mission number for this period of time with this tail number, which is a very handy feature, right? If I were to hit schedule, it would add it here, and then it would show up here. And now if anybody tried to schedule that airplane for that period of time, it would see that it's already booked, and it would force a scheduling conflict. It's possible to schedule airplanes even with a scheduling conflict in WMIRS. WMIRS doesn't actually prevent you from scheduling airplanes in conflict with each other, but it lets you know that, hey, somebody is already expecting to have this airplane available, and so you need to contact that person and sort it out, right? Whatever, if you really need that airplane, find out if they have any flexibility in their schedule, etc., or find a different airplane, different time, different day, etc., right? So that's the scheduling module, very handy. And this is really the only way we have right now to sort of figure out where if the airplanes are available. This is synchronized with the sorties in WMIRS. And so if somebody takes the airplane and moves it somewhere else, then it should show you where the airplane is, right? So don't just assume, because 116 is based at Fort Worth Meacham, that if it's available, it's at Fort Worth Meacham, because there may be a previous sortie here where the airplane was relocated and it's not necessarily going to show you that, right? How can you actually find that out? Well, I'll show you. So let's go back to WMIRS, and let's go now down to the maintenance module, which again is under support on the left-hand side. A good way to do it is to use this. I'm sure there's all kinds of techniques, and I probably don't know all the best ones, but I tend to go to this current aircraft maintenance snapshot. You got to go through the rigmarole of selecting your wing, and we are Southwest Region, Texas 001. And because it's in alphabetical order, it makes it easy for us because we're always the last one on the list. So I select that, and then it brings up, again, this list of every airplane in the CAP wing. So let's say I want to find out the latest on 455. Well, I just scroll down here to 455. I see this FMC. The clue that I have is that it's green, which is nice. So even though it has some discrepancy, it's still mission capable. And then here it gives you the same information that should be on the cover of this document called the aircraft information file, which is co-located with the aircraft, which we can talk about here if we get time. But it should tell me, hey, here's based on the last sortie, here's the last TAC hours. We base all the unless we don't have a TAC meter in some airplanes, we base all of our maintenance actions on the TAC time. So we have the TAC hours, we have the date it was last flown, hours flown in the last 30 days, next oil change due, which is great, and also tells you how many hours until the next oil change. Likewise, the next number of hours to the next 100-hour annual, the number of hours to the next engine overhaul, which is great. So you can kind of think about, all right, if I'm going to fly multiple training sorties, and I'm going to schedule this airplane, does it have enough hours left on it before it's going to go into maintenance, right? And I want to schedule an airplane to overfly the required maintenance items. So that tells you all of that, right? You also have this. So let's say I want to see the discrepancies. Just click on there, and it's going to tell you. It's going to bring you to this aircraft maintenance discrepancy log, and you have a section here where you can look at other airplanes once you're in this discrepancy log. But it goes to the one that you selected. So here's 455. And here's the discrepancies, right? Nose wheel prevents pilot from checking tire pressure. Okay. Cosmetic on the flight walk around, found a crack on the outboard elevator. Let's see here. Something about the trim, but apparently not enough to ground the aircraft. The PFD configuration. Okay, so some minor stuff, right? This one, by the way, on 445 has been there forever. We can't seem to find a problem. They've checked and checked and checked, but it's never significant enough to really affect your flying the airplane. So here you get to read up on the discrepancies, right? So that's super helpful. Go back to the snapshot. Let's see here. It automatically scrolls back to the top of the screen. The other thing that I like to check is this AIF cover. So like I said, this AIF, this aircraft information file, is a document, actually a binder full of documents that is required to be in the airplane whenever it goes flying. And it has a bunch of information on the front page, on the very cover, and that information should match what's in the aircraft snapshot, aircraft maintenance snapshot. And in fact, the aircraft custodians will use this to print out this piece of paper to put it in the binder to make sure that all this information is correct, right? So, when you go out to the airplane, good to check this thing is there, that it matches what it's supposed to in the aircraft snapshot. Okay, so let's now go to, and by the way, this section here tells you that where the airplane is based. So in this case, based at GPM, but it doesn't necessarily tell you where the airplane is. So we have had situations in the past where the airplane is not where it is based at because somebody moved it and then somebody scheduled it because it looked like it was available. And they went to the airport only to find that the airplane is not where it's supposed to be, or at least not where it's based. And the only way to really find that out is to go back in the scheduling module and find the last time it was flown and look at that sortie and see where they went, right? Which is a little bit of a pain in the ass, but always good to check before you schedule an airplane to make sure it's actually located at the place that you expect it to be, right? And I know it's been a problem for a while. We used to have a different system to actually track the movement of the aircraft, but it's not an official CAP national solution. And so I know they're working through different ways to figure out, to show you where the current aircraft is. But right now, this scheduling module is the best one that we have. Okay, let's see. Flight aware. Yeah, that's actually a really good suggestion, right? I do that all the time. If you go into flight aware, type in the tail number, it will tell you where the airplane last showed up on the FAA's radar. And that's a pretty good indication. All right, let's go back to WMIRS. And if you go from here to get back to that main page, go here to the current missions. This shows you all the current missions, right? And in theory, if the mission is green, it means it's approved and funded. But of course, you look at the mission numbers, these all begin with a 21, which means they're fiscal year 21, which means these are all last year's missions, right? So starting with the 22 is all of these year missions, and they're showing as green. That doesn't necessarily mean they have funding, right? So the missions are approved by the Air Force, but right now the funding stream has not been opened up for any of these fiscal year 22 missions. So stand by for that. But you can always get the information on the mission by actually clicking the number, and it's going to tell you some information about it. This number here, though, is not always a indication of the current funding available for that particular mission, right? So you really just have to keep your ear to the ground, and we'll let you know when these missions are funded and whether you can go flying or not. But let's say that you are. Let's say that it's funded and the mission is open and you are approved to go do your onboarding sorties. And so you want to come in here and you want to create sorties to do your onboarding, right? So let's go in here to the onboarding. Let's see, do we have any? Let's see. Okay, let me go to last year's because we don't have any ones open up for this year, this current fiscal year. So let's go back to current missions and let's go to, let's see, 21. Let's see here. So you see we have lots and lots of missions. Here it is. No, that's 22. There's the 21. 21 onboarding. Not that it matters too much for our purposes. Tell you what, let's go to the Form 91 eval from last year. This is Southwest region, so let's go to the Texas region, and you can see we had 471 sorties in here. Of course, many of them were canceled, but let's go to the last complete sortie that was flown, right? And so normally what you would do is, if you didn't use the scheduling module to add the sortie to your mission number, you can add it here. You do that just by clicking Add Powered Sort. But we're not going to add another sortie, so let's go to the last one that was complete in the fiscal year, and that is this guy here. And if it's a sortie that's already complete, you're going to get this warning. So don't change anything once you closed out the sortie. But we're not going to change anything. So it's going to look like this, except all these forms are going to be blank. Now, if you created it from the scheduling module, it will already have an airplane in here. And once you select the airplane, it will automatically configure all of this information because actually this is not good because this is not a power sortie. Let's go to this one here, 239, right? Okay, yes. So yeah, here we go. In this case, this was a relocation to do a check ride. And if you have the tail number in here, it automatically fill in the sortie number, the call sign. We'll talk about call signs here in a bit. The speed, the color, the home base, and then the configuration, right? All the equipment that the airplane is. Of course, you can select all this manually. If you just type in the correct tail number here, it'll fill it in for you, right? This block won't appear until you're ready to debrief the sortie. So when you first create it, this information won't be here. What will be here is the crew, right? And if you're scheduling the sortie for yourself, you're going to be the crew contact. So you put some information here, including your contact information. And then you're going to want to find a, you know what, I don't want to clear this because I don't want to change the sortie. But these fields here are going to be blank. Let me see if I can find one that is not been flown yet. There's probably a Texas MISC flight that, okay. By the way, if you're not using Air Force funding, you're going to pay for the airplane yourself for whatever reason. We do have this airplane here, this mission here called Texas MISC. And let me go down to the current fiscal year for Texas MISC. And this mission is open because the Air Force is not paying for it, right? And so there's 10 sorties here. Let's see if anybody has, here's one that's pending release. It's great. Okay. So we're going to mess around with this blank sortie here that doesn't have a crew currently. So let's go into edit and let's go edit. Thinking. Okay. There's a number of profiles here, which I'll talk about in a second, but you put same deal. You put your tail number here, you fill all this information, put in your departure airport, the time of takeoff, the expected time of landing, Typically, we do 1.5 for these training sorties. And then you go in here, you put in your contact. Now you want to put yourself in as the pilot, right? So you click on here and you scroll down the list and you see, oh, what's going on here? I'm not on this list. Okay, how do I get on this list so I can add myself to the crew? Well, the way you do that is you go down here to the sign in new person. That says, yes, I'm going to take you to a new tab. I'm going to sign in myself since I'm already signed in. Type in your CAP ID number and it'll say, is this your person? Yes. If you want to give yourself a default role, that's fine. You can do that. You can also leave it blank and pick that later, no problem. Put in emergency contact info if you want. I usually leave this blank because I'm not signing in a facility, but I will normally go here and put in that I have a cell phone, camera, I carry a small emergency survival kit, etc. And then I hit update. And when I do that, and I go onto this list, I'm available, right? And when you're first starting out, you're going to be a Form 5 trainee, and then you'll go in here to find your instructor. And let's say that, let's see here, Mike Duke is going to be my instructor. So I'll put him in here as instructor. And then at that point, I would go in here and hit update, and that would actually add me to the sortie. I'm not going to do that right now because I don't even know whose sortie this is. I don't want to mess with it, but that's how you do that. You add yourself, you sign yourself into the mission, and add yourself. And then, so let's go to the briefing tab. Unless you hit update, it's not going to save your changes. So if you do make changes, you definitely want to hit update. And then here's where you actually fill out your plan for the mission. Now, if you are going to participate in a big actual search and rescue exercise, where you go to an incident command post and you sign into the mission, and there's a planning staff, and you're going to be assigned to a search and rescue mission, they're going to fill all this information out for you typically. And that's how you will get your tasking to go out and do this. But if you're just flying locally on a practice flight, you're going to have to fill all this in yourself. And we like to have this form as complete as possible. So fill out all the tabs, even if there's no ground teams, go ahead and put ground team NA and put in whatever you can about the mission, right? And typically it's going to be initial onboarding sortie or initial G1000 sortie, whatever the case is. You're not going to have any deliverables. You're not going to have any actions taken to objectives. Route of flight is probably going to be local. Altitude assignment is probably going to be per ATC or none. But you may have some hazards to flight, like winds or traffic or something that you want to put in there. You want to put your weather conditions. If it is a cross country, flight plan will be required. And it gives you an option to do a flight plan open. I didn't talk about the ORM. We can go over that real quick. And then if there's any, this could be NA, or you could leave it blank, or there could actually be special instructions that your instructor has told you to follow. You put all that in there, you hit update, and now all the information is there that you need to go get a release, right? And then when you go back to the list of sorties, you see it's pending release, and pending release, and then there'll be a process by which you get a flight release, at which time this will turn green into release, and then you're approved to go out and fly the sortie, right? Another quick thing I'll mention here is a couple things about WMIRS that you're going to care about. There is a section here, ORM. Now, it is not necessarily required that you do the ORM via this ORM worksheet, but this is definitely the easiest way to do it. And that is you click on that ORM button and you start going through this checklist, right? And there's a couple things that you're going to need here, like the temperature, dew point, the overall winds. You just kind of go down through the list. There's a very important section to this ORM checklist, and that is what, in your opinion, what are the primary risks that you face on this mission? And here, this person put in air traffic and bird strike. I think it's a pretty good answer, especially if you're in a class Bravo type of airspace like we have in DFW. And how are you going to mitigate that? Well, you're going to use situational awareness. I often I'll use the ADSB. I'll use flight following. I'll talk to ATC. I will aggressively scan the area to look out for that traffic, right? And so you have all that stuff filled out. You hit submit. And when you do that, it will automatically update this page. It'll give you a score. And now when you go to get your flight release, it will give this information to the flight release officer to let them know that you've gone through it, and you've sort of calculated your risk, and you're ready to go. Now, when you are ready to go, and you do need a flight release, you're going to want to have a flight release officer. There's probably a number of them in your squadron. So talk to your instructor, talk to your squadron commander, find a flight release person, contact them ahead of time. And then the morning of your flight, or the day or the night prior to your flight, you can contact that person, go through a flight release checklist. They'll ask you a bunch of questions, and then they'll give you a flight release if everything checks out and everything's good in WMIRS, everything's good in ops quals. And at that point, this block here will turn green. If you scheduled this flight, you'll also get an email, and you will be ready to go fly it, right? Okay, so that's pretty much a very quick and dirty review of WMIRS, but it's everything you need to get a flight scheduled and get ready to go do your first training flight. Does anybody have any questions about any of that? Okay, let's go back to, let me just go through our pamphlet here and see what other things we want to talk about. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about what you're actually going to have to train on, and what the standards you're going to have to meet to get an evaluation. Oh, that's a good point. The post-flight, yeah, let's do that real quick since I have WMIRS up. Let's go into this flight here, which has already been completed and debriefed. So when you go flying, you're going to want to have yourself some sort of knee board, notepad, something. I use the scratch pad on my iPad in ForeFlight. However you want to record, but you're going to want to record some very important pieces of information. You're going to want to record your takeoff and landing times. You're going to want to record your starting and ending HOBS times. And let me, okay, I risk embarrassing myself here by showing you all of my photos, but here we go. Let's take a look at this guy here. So one of the things I often do is take a snapshot of this piece of paper, which is in every airplane. So in that aircraft information file, which again has to be in every airplane whenever it goes flying, there is a piece of paper called the aircraft time log, or the aircraft flight time log, airplane. And I think it's in tab 1 of that AIF. There's a lot of things in that AIF. You go through it to see all the stuff. This is how we keep sort of manual track of the flight times, of the mission information for every sortie, right? And so you can see we have a line here for every sortie. And before you walk away from the airplane, this has to be filled out. And then you're going to use this information to fill out WMIRS, right? And then there's a reconciliation process whereby the wing staff and the aircraft custodian, make sure that the information that's in a book matches what's in WMIRS. And if they don't match, then they got to figure out what the discrepancy is, right? But you can see every one of these entries has a date, has a mission number, has a sortie number. And if you go back into WMIRS, you can see that every sortie in the mission is assigned a sortie number, and that gets assigned to you when you create this. So you don't have to pick it; it's assigned to that sortie when you create it in WMIRS. The symbol, I was going to talk about the profiles. The symbol also is assigned per the sortie, right? In this case, the Texas MISC has a number of symbols that it could be assigned to. But just go into your, let's see here. If you go into sortie info, it's going to tell you what your symbol is. When you get your flight release and you get that email, it's also going to tell you what that symbol is, right? So here's that symbol that you'll put in this tab in WMIRS, or in the log. The flight release officer name and cap ID number, and then who's in the airplane, their names and their cap IDs. And then finally, your departure airport. And silly me, I did this back in December, and must have forgotten to actually put in the time, takeoff and landing times. But you're going to want to write down the takeoff and landing times of your departure airport and your arrival airport in Zulu, as well as the HOBS times and the TAC times. And at the end of the sortie, when you add fuel, if you happen to have to add any oil, you record that here as well, right? And so you write all this in the book. And then I always take a snapshot because I'm going to go home and I'm going to log into WMIRS. I'm going to fill it out with the same information. And so you go into the debrief tab here. So let's go back to debrief sortie. Remember, your sortie is green. It's been released. You've actually flown it now. And let's see here. Oh, I got a Q&A. I didn't even notice the Q&A tab. Let's see here. In WMIRS, when you go to a new mission number that you have not used before, do you need to sign in as a new person? If you might have to, right? Because you may, if you're the first person to use this mission number and no one has been signed in, then you're probably going to have to sign yourself in. But you'll know because you'll go to the sortie info tab. You'll try to select yourself from the pull down menu. And if you're not in there, then you know you're going to have to, if you go down here and you try to select this pull down menu and you're not on the pull down list, then yeah, obviously you're going to have to sign yourself in, right?
Yeah, so that's right. For each mission, the individuals have to be signed into that mission. If you were not signed into the mission because an incident commander or planning section chief or someone else signed you in, then you'll have to sign yourself in. An example of that is if you're going to do like cadet orientation flights or something like that, and hadn't done any yet this year, you'll have to sign yourself in. You actually have to also then sign in the cadets that have not yet been on that mission if they've not yet flown. Sure. So each mission is independent in terms of the sign-ins. But I just want to caution you, you may not have to sign yourself in if you're signing into a mission that an incident commander, planning section chief, or someone else has already bulk signed the people in.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. If you're going to go participate in a big search and rescue operation or a SARX, the planning staff may have already signed you in, right? They may have already created that sortie and signed you to it and signed you in. And so you may not have to do that. But if the field is empty, just look at the pull down menu. If your name is there, click on it. If not, sign yourself in. Okay, so looking at this one, at this debrief tab. So let's say I flew this sortie. I wrote down the HOBS and TAC time, takeoff and landing times. I put them in the book. I took a snapshot of it, brought the snapshot home, signed in. Here's where you're going to put that information here, right? And it's oriented via end and start times so that you can do the arithmetic. Let's see here. Sure thing, Bob. Happy to. Yeah, send them my way. You put it in there. It automatically calculate your sortie duration. If for some reason you're going to transit, you're doing some specific training task, you have to actually transit to the training area, you can put the to from time here in this form, and then it'll automatically, based on the total sortie duration and the to from time that you put, it'll calculate the time in the area. I don't know that we specifically track that, but it's an option in WMIRS, so don't be afraid to use it. And then when you're done, you put fuel here. And then, of course, you're going to have to get typically if you're getting fuel for the airplane at the end of a sortie, that fuel is going to have to be paid for. There is a credit card in that AIF book. There, and when you open it up, you'll see that there's a little pouch attached to the 3-ring portion of the 3-ring binder, a little zip open pouch, and in there you'll find a gray credit card that is the NHQ credit card for funded missions, fuel card. You'll use that to pay for your gas. You'll get a receipt. You'll get the card back. You put the card back in the pouch, take the receipt home, and then you use the information on the receipt to fill out the rest of this information, including the cost, the receipt number. And then when you're done, you need to upload that receipt to validate that cost. And you do that here. You just click on sortie files, and I'll bring open a little window. Once you've taken a picture of the receipt or scanned the receipt, it gives the opportunity for you to upload that file into this sortie so that when they do all the accounting, they can reconcile it. There are a couple of things that you need to actually handwrite on the receipt. They are your name, your cap ID, and the mission and sortie number. So that if for some reason they have this file, this picture of a receipt, and it becomes separated from the record, they can match it to the correct sortie. Shane, is there an actual regulation that tells us what we're supposed to write on those? Is that just sort of a common practice?
I know of no actual regulation.
Yeah.
And the common practice is usually whatever the IC says for whoever's
Yeah.
in charge of that given mission.
Okay. So when in doubt, name, cap ID, sortie number, sortie mission number, and sortie number, handwritten on the receipt. Also, it's a good idea. Typically they'll print the tail number on the receipt, as well as the date and time that you got the fuel or that you paid for the fuel. If not a bad idea to write that information on there. That way there's no doubt about what airplane, what sortie that information belongs to. And then upload it, and it'll be there for the accounting purposes. And then you fill out the rest of this stuff, the summary, if there are any deliverables, what the weather conditions are. Typically our sorties are successful. Even if even if you are taking a check ride and for some reason you don't pass your check ride, the sortie is probably still effective, right? You went up there and you kind of did what you set out to do. It wouldn't be effective if you had a specific thing that you needed to do, like a transport mission, and you couldn't make it to your destination because of the weather or whatever the case was. Then that might be an ineffective sortie. But generally speaking, regardless of the outcome of the check ride or the training, we'll mark the sortie as effective, and then you'll just reschedule if you need to. Let's see, Shane's putting a few other things up here. If you do use personal card, it was a reimbursement.
I'm trying to answer questions.
Okay.
You don't have to go through it. So someone asked about using a personal credit card. With respect to using a personal credit card, if you have to use one, for example, because the national headquarters card is broken or the machine doesn't take it or whatever it is, and it's a reimbursable mission, then you can submit for reimbursement. I would just suggest it is a paperwork nightmare in order to do so. There is a process to do it. If you end up in that kind of situation, I recommend that you cannot contact the wing finance officer, who's called Lori Lancaster, or you can get Matt or me or someone else who can help you through the process. There is a process to do it, but it's a pain, and I recommend avoiding it.
Yeah. And typically, like especially if you're flying out of home station and you need to get fuel, and then the credit card doesn't work, you can just say, hey, let me call my squadron commander, and we will get you a credit card ASAP. And they're pretty good about the next day or the day after, getting in there with a credit card or whatever the issue is, right? So don't jump straight into using your personal credit card unless you have no other choice. Okay, let's see here. So the final thing on the debrief tab is the debrief with your flight release officer. Typically with your flight release officer. And once you've done that, you typically call your flight release officer and let them know there was a successful sortie and what you did. And then you could put that date and time here and the cap ID of that person. Now, if you're flying in a big search and rescue operation, there may be a specific debrief person that you're going to talk to do a debrief that's not your flight release officer or not the air operations branch chief or the incident commander, whoever the case is that sent you off on that mission. If it's a different person, then you put your different person cap ID here. If it's over the phone, then you just click on the phone debriefing, right? And that way everything is in there. And once you do that, when you go back to the air sortie list, it will now show as the sortie is complete. And you will have accomplished your mission, right? Okay, let's see here. Any other questions? We're about an hour and 20 minutes into it. I scheduled this for 2 hours. I don't know that I want to go 2 hours. So we might talk a little bit about the actual 70-5 and the eval process and some important documents that you're going to want to think about as you do your training. But let's see here. Any other things we need to talk about from the questions here, Shane, as they're coming in? No, I think
largely trying to answer them one by one.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about the eval process, because that's going to inform you as you get ready for your check ride, right? You know, obviously when we're doing your training per this 71-1 document, you want to get good at those things. Actually, let me go to the 71-1, and let's go back to this onboarding syllabus, this one-page onboarding syllabus. And it's going to have these things, right? And of course, you will go through all of these things with your instructor, and they will show you the AIF and the airworthiness documents we keep in the airplane, and then some things specific to that are required in your eval that you're going to have to demonstrate proficiency in, including all of these things for the pattern work and the post-flight, all the WMIRS stuff we just talked about, that MRAD, that aircraft maintenance, I forget what MRAD stands for, but it's that aircraft discrepancy module that I showed you. So all of these things, right? And you're going to want to be sort of proficient at all these things to consider yourself, ready for your eval. So let's talk about the actual eval. There is a document. I think it is this document, CAP Standard 72-2. So, and just to remind you, there's a document. This document here is a regulation 71-1. You're going to get very familiar with this. And in fact, you're going to have to take your online test using this document as an open book reference to do that. It's a regulation. So when you go in here to your CAP, how you doing? Let's see here, gocap.com. Once again, go here, members, publication library, click on publication library. So we have regulations, we have pamphlets, we have standards, we have forms, right? So this 70-1 is a regulation. You have to do the things that are in here. There is a standard 72-5, which covers how we do evaluations. You're going to want to get familiar with this document, right? And so it kind of talks about general guidance, the authority, responsibility of your check pilot, the plan of action for the evaluation, some guidance to actual check pilots on how they're going to do that, the grading, the mandatory items, etc. Right? So, you know, go through here, go through this document, and you kind of familiarize yourself with what the check pilot is responsible for. The check pilot is going to give you something called a plan of action, and that document, you know, they're going to send you, you know, a day or two ahead of time. Let's see here. You don't need to see that. You need to see this, or is it this? Yeah, this a document that looks like this, called it Form 5 Plan of Action. Which your check pilot will probably send you an email with this form attached to remind you of, you know, all the things you need to have with you to be ready for the check ride, and your documentation, right? You need to have all of these documents with you, including, you know, the documentation that shows that your current carry passengers in the airplane, so logbook entries, your evidence of your BFR, whether that's wings or an actual BFR, the endorsements, etc. Being able to show how you went into WMIRS and looked at the maintenance module and checked the status of the aircraft and determined that it was airworthy, and that then you could cross-check that with the AIF and the HOBS and the TAC to show that all those things match. There'll be an oral exam that's kind of covered to this thing, including that 70-1 regulation we just talked about, maybe some questions that the check pilot is going to focus on, the flight release procedures, right? All of these things, right? So this is check pilot telling you, hey, per this plan of action, here's all the things we're going to cover, right? And so once they send you this document, you go through it, you make sure you're ready to do all the things that are on the plan of action. And that then plan of action will probably say, hey, I need you to plan a cross-country flight, and give you some specific guidance on that. I might ask you some specific systems knowledge. You know, we like to talk about the electric system in the G1000 because it's quite a bit more complicated than the other airplanes, right? And then, okay, that's the oral. Now, here's what we're probably going to do in the flight. I'm going to ask you to go through all the ground operations. This is what my flight profile is going to look like, right? So you go through this document, and this is how you're going to prepare for that evaluation, right? And do all your planning, preparation, bring all your documents, etc. Then they're going to send you a document called the expectations document, which is going to spell out the expectations, right? And so, hey, I want you to have reviewed these standards, which is that document I just showed you. I expect you to have current flight review, et cetera, et cetera. Your endorsements, your flight release, right? Here's the things I want to talk about in the pre-flights for G1000. It repeats a lot of it of the plan of action, maybe goes into a little bit more detail about, hey, here's what I actually want in the profile: clearing turns, steep turns, slow flight, etc. I need you to set up a flight plan in the G1000. I need you to set up a approach for IFR, etc. And so this is your check pilot's way of making sure that you are clear about what you're actually going to do on the eval, what the expectations are, and give you an opportunity to ask questions and clarify any confusion that you have, right? I can tell you it is a bit of a trend item where people show up for a check ride and they're really not ready for it because they haven't flown in a while, they're not proficient, they haven't really planned the sortie out properly, even after having received a document like this. And so we really want to make sure that your eval is a good, positive experience, and there's no reason for us to, think about not passing you. And so make sure you get these documents from your check pilot, make sure you go through them and that you're ready for them. Going back to the standard for evaluations, kind of talk about the expectations document. Okay, the grading criteria. So on your form, and by the way, here's your form. This is the actual eval form. It has a number of things on it, and it basically covers any type of qualification that we could give you as a pilot for a CAP airplane, whether that's your sort of initial eval, which will be an annual, or let's say you're already checked on 172, you're going to add 182. We'll do an abbreviated and cover less things, but we'll mark it as an abbreviated check ride data evaluation. And then additional endorsements if you do an instrument demo, if it's a high performance airplane, complex turbo, G1000, et cetera, right? Orientation pilot, check pilot, et cetera. And so here's all the things that we have to cover. And it's a thing that we have to cover because it is italicized on this form. And so you see that we have numbers of grade categories for all of these items: qualified, qualified with training, which we'll talk about, unqualified, discussed verbally, or not performed. And so here is where we talk about what those things actually mean, right? Qualified, pretty self-explanatory. You did it, you're good. I think you could do it by yourself, you're qualified, right? Qualify with training. So we often have a situation where someone goes to do a particular task and they're not quite proficient at it. Maybe they don't have the best understanding of the task. Maybe they did a steep turn and the steep turn wasn't very good. They don't quite understand why the steep turn wasn't good. And so the check pilot might have to give a little bit of instruction on that particular task, right? Or maybe there's a piece of equipment on the airplane you're not familiar with, or maybe, you're not super proficient at creating a flight plan in the G1000 or whatever the case is. And the check pilot has to kind of step in and give you a little bit of instruction. But after that little bit of instruction, you're good, right? You figured out how to do it. You demonstrate the task well. In that case, we can pass you with a qualified with training. Mark that on that 70-5 form here in the QT category, and you're off to the races, right? And only if it's clear that you are not able or ready to do a particular task or perform it to within the standards of that document, would we give you a U for that task. And if there's a U on this form, then you don't pass the check ride. You're going to have to repeat at the very least those particular items, right? So we really try to avoid that. But this is that particular grading criteria in this 72-5 standards document, right? Here's where it talks about the mandatory items, and a couple things that I want to mention here on these italicized mandatory items. So this section here, your sort of your normal VFR maneuvers. You can see here it's labeled VFR ACS Aircrew Certification Standards for VFR evaluation. So these are things, and the ones that are italicized are things that you must do on your check ride. You must demonstrate proficiency, and that the standard is the FAA ACS, right? So if you're a private pilot, the ACS for the maneuver, so for example, your steep turns per your private pilot ACS is 45 degrees angle of bank plus or minus 10 degrees plus or minus 100 feet. That's the standard. And if you're a private pilot, we will evaluate you to that standard because that's the FAA ACS that you fall under. If you're a commercial pilot, now you got to do 50 degrees angle of bank, right? So the ACS we're going to use is per the qualification that you hold per the FAA. You can see here that there's a lot of things that we would certainly normally consider as essential tasks, but aren't required for this eval, right? So like the soft field takeoff and landing, right? The FAA is going to make you do that on your private pilot check ride, but it is not necessarily required in a CAP evaluation, mainly because we are just not going to do a lot of soft field operations in the CAP. Like I have never been, in 17 years of flying with the CAP, I've never been sent to land at a grass field. Not to say that it couldn't happen, but it's super rare, right? So we're not going to spend a lot of time evaluating something that is probably not going to apply to you, right? But short field, sure. Like plenty of times I've been sent to a 3,000 foot asphalt strip to go pick something up. And so we want to make sure that you can do that, right? Likewise, we want to make sure you can make good go around decisions. We want to make sure that you can do slow flight. Slow flight is an emphasis that anybody who takes a check ride with me can tell you that I'm going to really focus on that, because we spend a lot of time low and slow looking out the windows. And I want to make sure that you understand where the backside of the power curve is for the airplane and can get out of it quickly if you inadvertently get too slow, right? We make you do a power off stall, but not necessarily a power on stall, right? Because power off stall really demonstrates that you can command the aircraft, and if you don't have time to do power on stall, it's okay. So when you want to make sure that you're ready to do this, and that the tasks that are in your plan of action that's sent to you by your check pilot kind of matches this form for the things that you're going to have to do, right? So we have this VFR evaluation. We have, if you go down here to other tasks, right? So this is the FAA portion of the VFR evaluation. This is the CAP specific portion of a VFR evaluation, right? And you can see none of these things for the CAP are italicized. So you can talk through a lot of them, like 70-1 compliance or the electronic flight bag requirements or using WMIRS, right? Don't necessarily have to demonstrate that on the check ride if you can kind of talk through it, and you can mark the V for verbal. And then if you're seeking additional endorsements like the G1000 VFR, there's not too much in here that's absolutely required, but autopilot trim failure, right? Because that's a thing that's a safety of flight issue in a G1000 aircraft. So we're going to make sure that you demonstrate that procedure and how to override a runaway autopilot trim malfunction. The instrument procedure, kind of like we have this same thing. We have this FAA portion that we want to make sure you cover, and then we have CAP stuff for IFR G1000. At some point, you may go do mountain flying. You may get turbo. You may do orientation pilot, and hopefully, eventually, you'll become an instructor and evaluator, in which case these items are there as well. When you're done, you're going to, and by the way, this is a document that you're going to sort of review with your check pilot before you go flying. You will sign this portion of the 70-5 before you go flying, right? Because I'm going to make sure that you are ready for the things that this paragraph says, which is you understand the rules of being a qualified CAP pilot, right? So I'm going to ask you to sign this before we go flying. Your information as verified by the check pilot. Typically, I don't mind if the student writes this in ahead of time and comes to the check ride with this stuff written in, but I also don't mind writing this in myself because it means I have to actually look at the documents, right? Because that's required for the check ride. And then when the check ride is over and you've debriefed it, then the check pilot can go in here and sign it, and then you are done, right? Although you still have to then go into ops quals, and in that airplane section of ops quals, enter your eval and all the endorsements that you got, hit submit, and then upload this into the pilot section of the document upload, and then it will go off for validation, and myself or somebody else will see it and look at this document and look at everything you submitted. Everything that matches will validate you. Hooray, you're a CAP pilot. So that's the process for the actual check ride. Any questions on any of that stuff? Okay, so let's see here. So we're actually making better time than I thought. What else did I want to cover? Well, tell you what, why don't you, is there anything, I think one thing I mentioned in the webinar invite was how to find an instructor, how to find a check pilot. Let's start with the check pilot process first. Let's go back to our Texas Wing website, which is here, texaswing.cap.gov. And let's go to operations. And let's go to standardization evaluation. And let's see here. So we used to have a list of check pilots, right? Now we just have this list of instructions. So log into eServices, ops quals, reports. Oh, let's do that. Okay, let's go into eServices. Let's go to ops quals. Let's go to reports. And then let's go to, okay, there's a couple good things in here that we want. Let's go to, is it skills evaluated by qualification, or is it, let's see what the list says. Oh, what's this DOV listing? Let me go back to the website and see what it says. It says go into, okay, specific qualification listing, and Texas 010, group 1, group 2. I'm going to do it for the whole way. Let's go back in here and let's go to specific qualification listing. Okay. Oh, look at that. Let's go into check pilot airplane. You report. And actually, I have just selected the Grand Prairie Squadron. And you can see in the Grand Prairie Squadron, we have 2 check pilots, myself and Leonard Ellis, right? And it gives you the CAP ID. So that's great. You know who your check pilots are. Of course, you can do that for your squadron. You can do it for the group. You can do it for the whole wing. Let's say you want to find out how to actually get a hold of me. So now I'm guessing the best way to do that is go into
actually, Matt, if you go back to the same report you did,
I
think this is in the instructions, so people just follow the instructions, they can do it. Go back to the screen that you used to pull the report.
Oh, okay. Oop, what was that? Why did I do that? What is here? No. Well, let me go a little bit. Let me do it this way. Ops quals, reports.
Yeah. And these instructions, click by click, are available on that standardization evaluation website. Go, same thing, click the same report, specific qualification. Good. And then go ahead and do your check pilot airplane, just like you did last time.
Okay.
But before you click view report, there's a box in the middle that says contact
Contact report.
report, yeah.
Yeah.
And then rerun the report.
Okay. Okay.
And it's actually going to give you a zip file that's got yeah, 2 files, and one of the 2
There we
actually
go.
have phone numbers.
You're right. Even easier. Great. So you can do that for your squadron. You can do that for your group or your wing, and get a whole list of check pilots and their contact information. For me, it's always easiest to send me an email because you know, typically during the day I'm tied up, can't pick up the phone. So if you send me an email, then we can schedule a check ride based on evaluation, et cetera. And then there's the same thing for instructors, right? Instructor pilot airplane, right? So same thing, view report. Yeah, this is good. So I'm learning something too, which is fantastic. So that's zip file. And if I go to the contact report, then there's, oh, we actually have a third, oops. We actually have a third instructor in the Grand Prairie Squadron, Chief Anoa, and then here is his contact information, right? So if you don't know how to find an instructor, or you don't have an instructor, or maybe you have an instructor, but your instructor is not very available because they're off, doing a job or something, you can find additional instructors, and then when you're ready, you can find additional evaluators. When in doubt, though, if you don't remember how to do that, you're not coming up with good results, just send me an email. I will connect you, even if you're not in the DFW area. I will connect you with the stand eval person in your area, and we will, if you're ready for a check ride, we will find you a person to get that check ride done. Okay, so that was the one other thing I wanted to cover this evening. Is there anything that I didn't cover that we still have 43 people on the line that you were hoping to find out and still haven't found out yet, that we can cover in the 27 minutes or the 17 minutes we theoretically have left before we hit the 2-hour mark? Okay. I'll tell you what, I'll hang on the line for a few more minutes in case anybody has an additional questions. But otherwise, we'll call that a class, as we say. Thanks so much for dialing in and spending some time with us, and hopefully getting a little bit better prepared. If you have additional questions, matt.martin at txwg.cap.gov, and send them my way. And okay, here's a question from Blake. Do endorsements have to be done in order? Example, can you be an orientation pilot before being a transport pilot? For that specific one, the answer is no. You have to be a transport mission pilot first, because you cannot be a solo PIC unless you are a TMP, right? WMIRS will not.
I believe you can be an orientation pilot because that's part of a Form 70-5, and a TMP is actually an ES qualification.
Okay.
So I do not think you have to be ES qualified in order to be an orientation pilot. To be a transport mission pilot, you have to do things like take IS 100 and 700, and it's all about emergency service stuff. An orientation pilot is about VFR pilots.
Okay. All right. Well, there you go. So the answer is no. You don't have to do those endorsements in order. And if your unit really needs you to be a orientation pilot, that's the case for quite a few units around the state, then yeah, you can kind of knock that out first and get going. Yes. So this webinar is going to appear on our Sandoval webpage, right? It's going to be all pilot is it going to be under this section here, Shane, under conference call recordings?
It'll be wherever you want to put it, man. Wherever you want it, you can put it.
Actually, we'll probably put it right here on this top page. We'll create a new link here called pilot onboarding. And it might take a couple days to get it here, but this is where you will be able to find it. Can I take, yes, you can take the IS 100 and 700 right now if you want to, before you've done anything else. I don't even think I don't even think they expire. You just have to have done them at some point. I think at the most, I saw 59 people dialed in at the peak, which is good. We only got 200 pilots in the wing, so 25% is pretty good, right? Okay. Well, again, thanks everybody for your attendance. Hopefully it was useful. Hit me up if you have questions. Otherwise, let's see here. Could I do orientation endorsement on my? Yes, you can do an orientation. I guess we can cover that real quick. So if you look at your 70-5 form, which is this document here, and you go under the section of orientation pilot, you can see that there is only one thing that's required, and that's demonstrate syllabus maneuvers. And that syllabus is contained in this pamphlet here, the 60-40, which you find in the same place that you found the other pamphlets that I showed you. If you go into this pamphlet, you'll see that there's a section of it that's broken out into syllabus events for cadets. And in each of those syllabus rides, there's a number of maneuvers. Well, some of those maneuvers are straight and level flight, right? Or climbing and descending, which incidentally is things that you have to do anyways on your VFR evaluation, right? So as long as you know where this document is, there is a test that you have to take online, the ORIDE test. And then you sort of make it a point to say, hey, this is also a ORIDE maneuver. Then yeah, you've completed the requirements for the ORIDE endorsement, and you can knock that out at the same time as your VFR check. When we take the form pilot check ride, can we also get checked out as TMP and orientate? Yeah, so yes, right. As Shane said, the TMP endorsement is an emergency services endorsement. So when you do the Form 5, you're doing all the things that you need to be, you're really doing the VFR evaluation. And then the VFR evaluation combined with the emergency services class courses online get you the TMP endorsement. And so, yeah, that's kind of baked into a normal Form 5. And then, as we just mentioned, that this is how you also add the ORIDE endorsement. Okay. Another good resource is the, you know what? I brought that one up and I didn't even talk about it. This one right here, the evaluation criteria, right? So if you want to really know what are the actual criteria that we're going to use to grade you on those events in the eval, they're located in this document. And you can see here, this is the criteria for the Q, the QT, and the U. And so if we go down here to kind of a normal maneuver item. So let's go here to something that's required, mandatory. Let's see here. Did I skip over them already? Yeah, I guess I did. Let's go back to the VFR ones. VFR evaluation. Okay. Boy, not a lot in here. Ground handling, crew resource management, VFR. One of the things you have to do for the this is one of the mandatory items for the G1000 VFR, right? The only mandatory item on the G1000 VFR eval. And so to qualify, you have to know what this is, know how to do this. You're not allowed to get training on it if you don't know. And if you can't do that, then this is how you fail that item, right? So yes, this is the document. Okay, so let's see here. Before I get to that, just to reiterate, this is the document that tells you what the grading criteria are for all of those items on the evaluation form. The best way to move from VFR pilot to TMP pilot. So let's go to that real quick because it seems to be something people are asking. If you go back into ops quals and we go back here to the what do I need? Let me put, so go on down here into transport mission pilot. Once again, these are the things that you need. So the way to go from VFR pilot to TMP is to make sure all these things are green. And these are the two things that typically hang people up. Like when you join TAP, they verify your eligibility. You upload all your things, and that validates your time, your PIC time. You go into Access, you do the general emergency services. You go into Access and do the aircraft ground handling, which you have to do anyways for VFR. And then go onto the FEMA website and do these two courses. You do all those. And if you're already a VFR pilot, you then become a TMP by virtue of these things. Costs associated with so if you do it right, right now that means waiting until the funding is turned on. Cost associated with pilot onboarding is zero, right? And you do that by referencing this document, and which is your requalification. You know, we need to post this on the Stand Eval website as well, Shane. I don't think I've been sending this around, but we need to actually get this on the website. You go in here to this document and you fill out this form, all this information, you send it to your squadron commander. Your squadron commander signs it. Squadron commander sends it to the group commander. Group commander signs it. Boom, your training is covered. Your cost is zero. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. All right, then we're going to call it. Okay. So once again, thanks for the time. Go to the website, get the document. Onboarding is misspelled. All right, this is why we have to do an annual update for the document. I'll make sure that it's corrected in the calendar year 22 version. Okay. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Again, email me with questions. Let me know if you have any trouble. Good luck, and we'll see you around. Okay. And